Well, hello again to those who are connecting through Heimtal Moravian Church in Edmonton and Trinity Moravian Church in New Carrollton, Maryland. I've been thinking a lot about procrastination while I study the gospel story of Jesus' encounter with Mary and Martha. Actually, it applies to last week's scripture a little bit too. Well, maybe a lot too. Which is good. I've been reading a lot of commentary advising that these scriptures, last week's parable of the Good Samaritan parable in response to the questioning religious legal scholar, and this week's account of Jesus' encounter with two sisters in Bethany are important to link together. I'll tell you why that is, and then I'll get around to my thoughts on procrastination. It's because in back-to-back scriptures that happen in close sequence, Jesus gives exactly opposite counsel. Yep. To the questioning lawyer, he says to do a bunch of stuff. It's not just what you say. This isn't working. Okay, some edits. Oh, no. This is why. That would have been bad. Okay, we've got this straightened out now. And so it is sermon in 3, 2, 1. Well, hello again to those joining through Heimtal Moravian Church in Edmonton and Trinity Moravian Church in New Carrollton, Maryland. As we get started, it's interesting to note that last week in the parable of the Good Samaritan, Jesus gave counsel exactly opposite to that he gives this week. Yep. To that questioning lawyer, he says to do a bunch of stuff. It's not just what you know that qualifies you to inherit eternal life. This week, he tells Martha to stop doing so much. It's all about sitting there and listening. Interesting. I did my final big paper in university on procrastination. Yes, I got it in on time. Actually, I worked a comedy sketch about it being late into my presentation, but I don't know if that helped my grade, but that was fun. Wait, shoot, I forgot to tell you my point here. At the end of this message, I'm going to ask you who you think was the bigger procrastinator, Mary or Martha. I should have been more organized going into this. I hope you don't think I'm lazy or that I don't think this is important. A few things have stuck with me about that paper on procrastination. That was a presentation well over 20 years ago. One is that some people who procrastinate think the job is small or easy. So what's the point of getting to it early? As others think that the job is too big and too hard. So there's no point in starting because it's not going to be good enough anyways. Nothing I do will be enough, so I might as well go out with friends. There are other factors at work. Thinking you don't have enough information. You don't possibly know enough to do a good job, so you'd better check one more reference before starting. If you've got one of those big do-it-yourself home repair manuals around your house, but don't get to the repairs, well... And of course, how can I do this project with all this other work hanging over my head? I can't start this project until I rearrange my closet and scrub the kitchen very thoroughly. How can I think straight with that hanging over my head? I'm wondering if this is feeling a little scattered. Some of you are thinking, I need to get to the point. Why am I talking around and around and bringing all this up from the past? And some of you are thinking that I'm articulating their life with all the stops and starts. If you are in one frame of mind and can't understand the other, you are in a good spot to understand Mary and Martha. Each of them had an approach that made total sense to them. Each of them couldn't understand why the other didn't just fall in line and do things the right way. And each of them appealed to Jesus for affirmation and validation. I'm wondering if you're starting to form an opinion of who was the bigger procrastinator, Mary or Martha. One is doing all the household work, while the other puts off her share and sits enthralled at the feet of the celebrity teacher. One can't pay attention to Jesus because of busy work she lets get in the way, while the other prioritizes correctly, knowing that the chores can wait. But Jesus will only be here for a moment. People I've asked have jumped to one or the other, and then did they wait? No, the other one. Then they asked me what the right answer was. Oh, there seems to be a distinct lack of clarity on this. One of the things that has me thinking about procrastination is an article put out by a company called Asana. I don't actually know what the company is. As far as I can tell, Asana is a workplace productivity company. Google and Facebook think I need a little help and pop these articles in front of me. This one has some interesting information and 7 handy tips to avoid procrastination at work. The very first line of the article was, procrastination doesn't mean laziness. The key point they kept hitting over and over again is the need for clarity. Clarity of mission and purpose, clarity of the importance of your tasks. A lack of clarity leads to procrastination. Why do a task if you don't know how it fits in the larger purpose? Oh, and buying their management tools would help you find clarity and banish procrastination from your life. I'm not knocking Asana. It looks like a great product business can benefit from, and I'm going to shamelessly borrow from their helpful article. So I want to see if their 7 tips might be helpful when it comes to being a Jesus-following apostolic disciple. For each of their 7 tips, I'll see if Martha can benefit from it and how it might apply to us. I'm going to apply to Martha and tip my hand a bit on who I think the procrastinator is. In this moment, Jesus tells Martha that Mary has chosen the correct approach. So maybe I'm giving Jesus some project manager tips from Asana. That should go well, telling Jesus what to do. Starting with the idea that procrastination isn't laziness, we can say to Martha and to ourselves, don't worry, nobody will think you are lazy if you aren't seen busily working every minute of the day. I was once on a clergy restoration retreat, and they had a work center set up so that pastors could keep grinding away at their job tasks. I asked a couple of my colleagues, and they said, well, they didn't want their congregation to think they were taking time off. To Martha, and to all of us, taking time with Jesus is not taking time off. To those of us who make an idol out of our busyness, we need to both knock it off and take contemplative time with Jesus and stop casting aspersions on the Marys of the world. Time in restoration and recreation is important and valuable to God. According to Asana, our productivity gurus, procrastination truly comes from a lack of clarity. Clarity isn't, this is a quote, clarity isn't always guaranteed. You need a dedicated tool and a good framework for visibility in order to prevent silos and unblock high-impact, meaningful work. I like the idea of doing high-impact, meaningful work, not just busy work. I think that's what Jesus is teaching by highlighting Mary's way. It's also what the parable of the Good Samaritan taught the religious scholar. The goal is high impact, meaningful work to build the kingdom. Apparently, I'm supposed to know what my company goal is and provide clarity. I guess when it comes to the true goals set by Jesus, it is build the kingdom of heaven on earth. Justice, mercy, and compassion by God's standards, not our own tribal or national interests. Got it. Nice and clear. Here are their tips. Remember, there are 7 of them. Tip 1, connect work to goals. Clearly understand how your work is contributing to team and company goals. When you have this level of clarity, work becomes meaningful. It's important for Martha to know that work isn't the issue. It's what priority you give it. And for us, can we connect our work meaningfully to our goal? That goal of doing our humanly best to bring about God's kingdom on earth. I mean, having a well-maintained church property is important, and just make sure it's meaningful. So be clear about having a nice church connects to our goal. Don't get defensive. Be meaningful. Tip 2, clarify priorities. Did the chores not have to be done? Of course they did. Martha knew this. Mary knew this. Jesus knew it. What was the priority in the moment, though? One thing it's important to note, there are some of us for whom practical tasks to keep the church going are our reason to be involved. That is okay. Later on in the book of Acts, we hear about those like Stephen called to do the meaningful service that he was passionate about. When I first got to Pennsylvania back in October, I spent hours running the new audio cable for the sound system at Palmer. I had the time to do it, and I was passionate about people being able to hear the message and the music. Other people knit or bake or decorate. We shouldn't slam them as Marthas. Just clarify priorities so that we're working towards our kingdom goals. Tip 3, use goals to fight perfectionism. Perfectionism is a huge factor in procrastination. Sometimes chronic procrastinators are actually perfectionists. This is another quote. In such a case, the pressure of doing perfect work is overwhelming, which leads to procrastination. What did Jesus have to say about perfectionism? He said, you'll never be perfect. I mean, God knew that when we were created. Jesus calls us to give and, importantly, receive grace. Grace is the path to salvation, not perfection. Tip 4, break big initiatives into smaller tasks. We're talking about a pretty big initiative, bringing about God's kingdom on earth. Remember what I said about things being too big, so why start? Saint Asana. Okay, great. I've elevated them from productivity management tool to guru and now to saint. According to Saint Asana, sometimes it's hard to see how and when you will complete a big project. As a result, it's tempting to just put it off. Instead of getting overwhelmed by the enormity of the project, break the work down into smaller chunks. You aren't responsible for bringing about every part of the kingdom. No individual effort can bring about the kingdom, but the very working together in and of itself is an achievement. Crossing racial or geographic boundaries to get anything done is not only a step towards, it is a living out of the kingdom. Tip 5, capture every to-do. No matter how small it is, it can go on a to-do list. Of course, we should all use a productivity tool like, you know what? I should ask Asana for a product placement fee. Okay. So back to the act of putting something on a list. validates it and allows it to be prioritized. Nothing is more frustrating than a list of things that never get done, though, especially those things that Jesus says we're supposed to do. Maybe we should start a to-do list of things that Jesus tells us to do, like love your neighbor, heal the sick, feed the poor. Martha, Martha, choose the better list to work from. Sort and prioritize your tasks and share them with the team so everybody knows what's being done to meet the goal, bringing about the kingdom. Tip 6. Set deadlines. The composer and conductor Leonard Bernstein said 2 things are needed to achieve greatness: a good plan and not quite enough time. Remembering the need for grace, not perfection, what if we knew we only had today or this week? And then Jesus was going to come and ask us how we were doing on our big goal. Jesus was on his way to Jerusalem when he stopped at the home of Mary and Martha. Whether it was the day before or a week before or still months to teach and share the gospel, Jesus knew his time was coming and told Mary and Martha what the better path was in this moment. We have no idea when the day or hour of Jesus' return will be. It might be a good idea to set ourselves some short-term deadlines. My salvation doesn't depend on it, but today I'm going to meet my neighbor. By the end of this week, I'll have that proposal to the district. I have 2 minutes. I'm going to text that friend I lost touch with right now. I know it might be awkward. Spirit be with me, I'm doing it. And yes, let's get the busy work done. Let's have the church kitchen cleaned by Tuesday so it isn't hanging over us. Tip 7. Here we go. Last thing we need to pass along to Jesus in his work with Martha. Try a time management strategy. Looked ahead in the article, and they don't even say it has to be one of Asana's products. That's nice of them. They really are helpful. Just check. There's a whole other article to link to. I could spend all day chasing more and more information, but I think that would defeat the purpose. I have clarity about getting my manuscript written and my message recorded. I need to get to the important work. It's family pizza night, and we watch the Great British Bake Off while we eat our pizza on Friday nights. That's the message from this tip. Set aside time and manage it for priorities, like Mary did. Use strategies so that work for God doesn't turn into busy work for the church. Schedule things, including time to be with Jesus, feel the Spirit, and build the kingdom. I know Jesus was pretty good at staying on task and keeping his team motivated, but thanks to Asana for giving me an article to base this message on. Here's the closing statement from that article. I think it bears fruit. Don't procrastinate creating clarity. While you can try to brute force your way out of procrastination and adopt a just do it attitude, these strategies are only effective in the short term at best. In the long run, the most effective way to stop procrastinating is to connect your work to larger goals. Dedicate yourself to creating clarity for yourself and your team. You'll find you're more motivated to get your work done when you can clearly see why your work matters. God has set us a big goal with a definite purpose. Bring about the kingdom on earth. Don't just hope for the best. Use strategies to recognize the important tasks. Don't ignore the chores. Give them the importance they deserve, but no more. Receive grace from God and give grace to others. Be gentle to others, just as Jesus was toward Martha. Make sure to keep clarity about the kingdom goal and engage in meaningful work towards it. Now, which you've all been pondering, who was the biggest procrastinator, Mary or Martha? Mary, who skipped out on her share of the chores to listen to Jesus, or Martha, who let her work get in the way of hearing what Jesus had to say? Don't worry, nobody's expecting the perfect answer. That leads to overthinking. I know who I pick, and in order to play fair, I'll say my answer, as I tip my hand, is Martha. Mostly because the teacher gave the answer about who had the right approach at that time. The more important question, do we have clarity? I pray that you find it as you prioritize your meaningful work for the kitchen. And don't forget to take your turn cleaning the church kitchen.